The decks of hazard. Breaker one, we might be crazy, but we ain't dumb. Crazy Rhino and BB Fury coming at you. Anyone on the Hit the Deck net got your ears on? Come on.
I appreciate that, like...
The CB talk?
Yes, thank you. CB radio. I'm the listener can't see, but I'm waving my right hand up and down for some reason, as if that's going to tell me what it was. I couldn't think of CB radio, but yes, thank you for that CB radio impression. That was highly entertaining.
I appreciate that. Yeah, well, growing up as a Dukes of Hazzard fan, which I've made no bones about on this podcast many a time, I kind of had experience doing the CB thing. And last week, too, there was a really cool special on the making of Smokey and the Bandit. So I've just kind of been in my little Southern mood lately, which I grew up in Brooklyn and have nothing to do with the South whatsoever except for those things.
Well, the south of Brooklyn?
That's true, yeah, it is the southwest of Brooklyn, but we're still considered the Northerners.
Yeah, can you explain the BB Fury? I mean, I personally understand the Fury bit, but just would you mind explaining BB Fury for us, please?
Yeah, sure. For another pop culture thing, and I believe we did mention this movie in the past, there was, and speaking of Brooklyn and Coney Island specifically, there was a movie in 1979, I believe it came out, called The Warriors. And it's become a very big cult classic because of just various reasons. But the premise of the movie is that there are a bunch of gangs, and one gang known as the Warriors, who are based in Coney Island, they had to make their way back from Manhattan, or I think it was the Bronx or Yonkers or something. They had to go all the way up. And this was just, they were using subways, by the way. They couldn't use any cars or carjacking or anything like that. They were good, bad kids. So they had to make their way back home after being framed for killing the head goon leader gang guy. So they had to avoid every other gang on their way back, one of the gangs being the BB Furies, which were known as the Baseball Furies, and they were in Manhattan and carried baseball bats and had their uniforms and things like that. So in our St. John's days, I didn't like saying my name because it doesn't roll off the tongue, as you may have figured out here on Hit the Deck. So
no, David Jay-Z, it's fine.
Right, yeah. People have thought I've said my name was Dave Ajazy. So the two S's back to back, it's just my own problem. Speech impediment or whatever you want to call it. So it doesn't flow well, at least for me. So I wanted to come up with a decent radio name and figured let me borrow the Baseball Furies and steal it for my own. So that's where the BB Fury came in, and I thought it was easier for the CB thing, and it just sounded better. So that's my horrible long-winded explanation.
Jimbo, come out and play. And by that I mean deck hockey. Come out and play deck hockey because that's what we're talking about.
Well done, sir. That was brilliant.
It was your thing. I was just kind of playing off of it. Anyway, yes, so thank you for that explanation. That makes a lot of sense.
Okay, good.
And of course I am a crazy rhino because I am a crazy rhino.
That's right. Well, the other thing that I ripped off was from the Dukes of Hazzard. That was basically one of the characters, Cooter Davenport. That's how he'd always address the Duke boys, mostly the Duke boys. He'd do the breaker one. He may be crazy, but he ain't dumb. Crazy Cooter coming at you on the Hazard net. So that's all. I'm just ripping things off left and right. So I apologize if we get in copyright infringements, and I will take the fall for that.
The Hazard net sounds like a knockoff of Terminator, something from Terminator, like a Southern hick kind of version of Skynet.
Well, the Dukes did precede the Terminator, but since the Terminator was a time travel movie and James Cameron thinks that time travel is a circle and not linear, who knows?
Actually, you know what? HazardNet sounds like ISP disc that you would get in the 90s. Like, for like AOL or Prodigy or something, you can subscribe to HazardNet and you can get on the Southern email. I don't know.
The Dukes of Hazzard were ahead of their time in a lot of ways.
Why do you let me talk, James? Why do you let me talk?
Because this is your podcast.
This is our podcast.
For the ride.
We're not going to get into this again.
All right. But yeah, the whole, well, just the last thing about at least my point on the Dukes and the Hazard net was that's exactly what it was. It was the CB world. So at the time, this was way before cell phones and things of that nature. So specifically truckers would use the CB to communicate with one another, and the Southern culture, they did the same thing. So it was kind of fun to see them use those CBs to get themselves in and out of trouble and communicate with one another immediately. And that's what the hazard net was. It was people all over Hazard County with their ears on, saying that their CBs were on and able to listen to what was going on out there. And good old boys, as the song recommends or suggests, they're just two good old boys. And good old boys and good old girls, all they want to do is help each other and do the right thing. And that's what the show was all about. So we need more shows like that. But anyway, that's the whole explanation for the hazard net and ripping off Cooter and whatever else I ripped off. Oh, yeah, the Warriors.
Welcome. You've got Hog.
Them Dukes.
All right.
Orange
So
Clunk
we were talking something about setting up a deck hockey league.
Yes, that's right. Rule number 1.
All right. Don't ramble on like this.
Rule number 2 is really agree on a set of rules and know the rules. Now, Gary and I have talked about this in the past, that there are governing rules, believe it or not, to deck hockey. And I believe Milek is one of the forefronts of the rules on deck hockey.
Yeah, they literally wrote the book.
Right. So when you are in a league or if you're going to start your own, just if you're not going to go exactly by the Milek rules or the other rules that are out there, just all agree to allow or disallow slap shots, make clear the offside rules. So what that means is that if you don't have a red line and people are playing for the first time or if it's more casual, at least prevent another player from screening your goalie all game long, because that's just not fun. And one of the reasons why they have the offside rule in hockey is so that you can't do that. So you don't have to be as specific as the NHL is. So we've seen that many a time in various leagues that we've played in and tournaments we've played in. But at minimum, just make sure that one guy, or at least everybody's coming back and forth at one point, and the opposing team doesn't have one guy standing in front of your goalie all the time. That's all. Okay. And preferably have timed periods, hopefully with a ref, if not at least having a timekeeper there who can proceed on what the time is left and could just see if a goal is good or not and things of that nature. It just makes things a lot easier and flow quicker as well.
Yeah, we've played with both timed periods and with just like the winner is the first to however many goals, and I can say that the timed periods are much more competitive and the intensity level goes way up because you only have a set amount of time to win the game and you really have to maximize every minute out there, and it's a lot of fun. It really is.
Yeah, I totally agree, and we really appreciate what Gary has done for our league too, is that he's turned his iPhone into a little timekeeper with a voice announcer and everything. So when there's 30 seconds for the face-off, there's 2 minutes intervals for intermissions between periods. It's 6 minutes nonstop running, and you even put it so that you have the horn sounding to start the period. And the best part is, Gary, even somehow how you did this is genius. You did the last minute of play of the period, so that's when to go all out if you're up by a goal or if you're down by a goal, and it really helps things a lot. And I agree 100%. I definitely prefer the timed periods as opposed to saying, all right, whoever gets to 7 goals first wins, because at least you can pace yourself a little bit more, and when you need to turn it on into another gear or just lay back and kind of avoid injury and things of that nature.
Yeah, so if you're interested in something like that, I'm not going to go into the whole complicated bit because I did have to kind of get creative with this, but basically I used an app called Seconds that I had to buy in the App Store. It wasn't that expensive. I don't remember the exact price, but it was less than $10. And so I have my iPhone connected to a Bluetooth speaker. And basically what I did with this app Seconds is I set intervals for each of the periods and the intermissions. And the nice thing about this app is that you can set music tracks for each interval. It's an interval timer. It's made to be like an exercise aid. So if you're doing different exercises, it times out your sets for you. But I figure I can use it just as well to time out a hockey game. So basically, I have it programmed to play a different music track for each set, and I edited the tracks so that they are exactly times for the periods or for the intermissions, so that at the proper time in the track, it'll play like last minute, or it'll start with the whistle, or it'll blow a horn at 30 seconds before. For the intermission, I have it set to blow 30 seconds before we start the period, so we know when we have to line up and what have you. So, obviously you don't have to use the same setup, but if you want to set up a timekeeper on the cheap, you can consider something like that.
It's really brilliant, and it takes it to a whole other level of fun and excitement. So really, thank you so much for coming up with all of that. It's really brilliant, and it makes a big difference.
The only problem is if I get a call during the game. Because my phone starts, playing a ringtone through the speaker because it's, my phone. And, or if I get a text, and that throws everybody off temporarily.
Well, that's right. Yeah. You even have the speaker set up for it too, so you can hear it loud and clear. So.
Yeah. And, use whatever setup works best for you. But that's what we do, and it works well for us. So you might want to consider that if you're trying to set up something yourself.
Yeah, and another reason to come out and join the LIQ. We could definitely use more players, and if you like playing and you're a fun, good teammate, come on out and check it out.
But if you are intent on making your own league, which is equally viable and great because, we're all about growing the sport of deck hockey. Another thing you want to make sure to do is that find some friends to play with, and you want to make sure that everybody is actually able to play physically. Like, that they are in good enough shape. You don't have to be in peak Olympic shape to play deck hockey, especially if you're just, amateurs that are messing around. But by the same token, you don't want anybody having a heart attack out in the middle of the court or the rink. So just make sure that whoever you're playing with is able to play.
Excellent. Yes. Another thing is, speaking of that level, in that vein, is make mandatory or at least strongly recommend players wear protective gear like mouth guards, helmets, hockey gloves, elbow pads, and shin guards, and the like. Because, again, you don't want anybody going to the hospital for any reason. You're just there to have fun.
Yeah.
And like Gary always says, don't be that guy.
Plus, for purely selfish reasons, if somebody's hurt, you're probably going to want to stop play, at least temporarily, to tend to them. And you don't want to have to stop the game in the middle. Who wants to stop? You're right in the middle of an intense competitive game, and somebody's laying on the ground bleeding, and you have to stop playing. I mean, who wants to do that? No. Just do yourself a favor. Make sure everybody's wearing some semblance of protective gear so that they don't have to stop playing, because nobody wants that.
Yeah. Wow, you're tough, man.
I'm a hockey player.
That's right. So more for the environment and play problems to avoid now is, for example, if you do wear your shin guards, and I definitely recommend you get a pair of shin guards, and they're not too expensive. There are various places you could find good quality shin guards, and they'll even help you with sizing and all that stuff too. But to keep your shin guards in place without tape, the Rhino Mac has a solution for that too.
Yeah, so there's a company named A&R makes something called shin sleeves, and they're basically these compression sleeves that are meant to James was trying to explain this to me before. I still don't entirely get it, but basically hold your muscles in place to better promote circulation and prevent injury. I'm not quite sure how that works, but regardless, that's what they're for. You can get them pretty cheaply. If you get them like a size up, you can pull them on over your shin guards, and they will hold very tightly, and the shin guards will stay in place. So you don't have to buy tape and use rolls of tape every time you play. You just pull these things on, you pull them off, and Bob's your uncle.
Another great Rhino Mac invention. Also, finding methods of practicing alone, that's a problem that I've always had. We've addressed this in Hit the Decks in the past. Because I live in a small place, there's limited space and limited place to practice. So even just trying to practice stick handling and shooting, one of the problems that I have with my shot is it's not accurate. So one thing I need to do is go home during the weeks where we're not playing, or the days we're not playing, and try and make sure I could keep my shot down and low and follow through properly. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of room to do that, so I have to be a little bit creative with that. So that's one thing that you can think of beforehand, if you just want to get better, you could obviously stick handle while you're watching a game or TV and things of that nature. And definitely have a separate stick if you can, and at least a separate puck or ball to keep inside so you're not bringing in all the germs and filth from the outside. Mm-hmm. But that's just something you need to consider too, is that, yeah, you want to have fun and it's not serious, so to speak, but you do, in order to have fun, you want to be able to play well and help out your team as best you can. So practice is definitely something that you should do and think about beforehand.
Yeah, and so another thing with regards to your equipment is you're going to want to make sure you have plenty of balls on hand in case you want to practice beforehand, and make sure that, or if you, here's a tip, if you are playing and ball gets shot out of play and you have like a running timer, then have another ball handy so you can just throw another ball in play and continue. That way you don't have to waste a lot of time going to get it during the game. And obviously you're going to want something to shoot the balls into, so you're going to want to grab yourself a couple of nice sturdy nets. Now, they don't have to be like NHL quality nets, because those are pretty expensive, and you also have to consider transport. So make sure either you have a truck big enough to hold 2 nets that are assembled, or be able to assemble them and break them down at the place that you're playing, as we do. And here's the thing with the nets. So if you're starting fresh, basically, with a bunch of people who don't know what they're doing, what we did when we started playing, because most of us had never played hockey regularly, we started with intermediate nets, which are 4x3, and we pretty quickly outgrew them, and we moved to the regulation size nets, which are 6x4. So you can start with the nets, but my advice would be, and do what you want, but my advice would be just to start out with the regulation nets, and you're going to have some pretty high scoring games at first if you don't have goalies who know what they're doing, but you will adjust to them surprisingly quickly as the goalies get comfortable and you get comfortable. So do whatever you're comfortable with, but I would advise, personally, I would recommend starting out from that place, unless, you're talking about kids, in which case that's a whole different discussion, I think. And another thing with equipment, I would recommend getting everybody to chip in. Like, if you're playing with a bunch of guys or girls, don't discriminate, because, trust me, don't discriminate. Get everybody to chip in, or as many people as you can chip in, because hockey can get expensive quick, and you don't want 1 or 2 people shouldering the entire cost. So spread it out as much as you can.
Excellent advice, absolutely. So from there, all you need now is to locate a place to play. Now, if you decide to play on a street, that is fine. Ideally, it would be on a dead-end street, so you don't have to worry about traffic coming and going. If, of course, people watching movies like Wayne's World and such, all about that.
Car.
Exactly.
Or Clerks.
Yep. And from experience, Gary and I, growing up in Brooklyn and Queens and playing street hockey and wiffle ball and stickball and things of that nature, we're not old, but the traffic was pretty bad when we were growing up. Now it's just ridiculous. I don't think you have a chance to even get a play or two on without 3 cars barreling down at you at any given time.
Yeah, it's tough.
So it is. And again, if you're on the street, the sewers are your worst enemy.
Yep, they hate you. They hate you.
They do, and they're hungry. They want to eat whatever object you're using to play with. If you're playing wiffle ball, they want to eat wiffle balls. If you're playing hockey, they want to eat hockey pucks, and they will get them. I guarantee you that. So exactly, they don't give them back either. So that's the worst part among everything. And then if you, like Gary said, recommended, if you don't have enough hockey pucks and hockey balls to play with, game over. So that's no fun. So definitely at least block them off with a hockey bag or something, or just make sure you don't play near them, because an errant shot or something, guaranteed it's going in those sewers. So just keep that in mind. Also, parked cars, that could make the playing surface much narrower. And if there are nice cars on the block, I'm somewhat of a car buff, so I wouldn't want to scratch those
You wouldn't
cars.
want to have to buff out the cars.
Exactly right. And being a guy who owns not a very nice car, but I'd appreciate it if people wouldn't abuse it. So I would do the same courtesy to other people's property. So just keep that in mind as well.
James is down with OPP.
Yeah.
I'm see that not only does that make me old, that reference, but I also don't actually understand what I'm saying because I was never into that kind of music. So that's a twofer. That's a doubly poor reference on my part.
There's an assist and a goal, so well done.
Yeah.
So if you don't play on a street, that's great. You don't have to worry about any of those things. One of the things that we do is we play in a handball court. So it's not as long as a side street would be, or obviously a hockey-specific rink, a roller hockey rink would be. But believe it or not, you do get enough cardio in, and it doesn't take that much of an adjustment to go to playing into a street or in a rink. And also, it's enclosed, so that helps a lot for errant shots and things of that nature. So you're always, at least majority of the time, if you make an errant shot or if the puck goes somewhere where it's not supposed to, you'll be able to retrieve it quickly and get back to playing as quickly as possible, as Gary mentioned before as well. So that's something else to consider.
And, of course, you won't be playing at all if you can't get enough players to field a couple of teams. So here's an important thing. It is a good idea to get a pool of players to draw from because not everybody is going to be available every time you want to play. But it's also important to remember that, people have lives, people have schedules, but people also enjoy doing this. So don't get discouraged if you have a week or two where you can't play, or whatever interval you decide to play. If you want to play monthly, or then there's a month that you can't do it, don't get discouraged because you just have to keep plugging at it, and it's worth it. It's worth the investment of time, and it pays off. Yeah,
amen to that. We do speak from experience there too, and when that does happen, hopefully you have at least one good friend that. Preferably someone who plays another position, like if you're friends with a goalie like I am. You could always say, hey, if you're around, take some shots on you, and you could just practice and just get a little bit better for the next time that everybody plays. But it's exactly. Stick with it, and the more consistent you get, the more people will show up, and it should get a little bit easier. But obviously you have things like weather to deal with, and people have lives and other commitments, so just keep that in mind. But when you do get the games together, hopefully you'll get a same group of people who will be enthusiastic about it and will show up. And that's the benefit of the LIQ has seen this, firsthand as well, in that you have Facebook and Twitter and emails and things. So you can definitely texting. It's pretty easy to keep a good core of people together to make sure that you have the best chance of playing regularly.